Great. Now that our app is running, we can visit it from our computer via localhost port 3000. Now we're going to get our app into a live server. I use DigitalOcean as my cloud service provider. I find it easy to get a server up and running. Now I'm signed into DigitalOcean. I'm going to click Create, then click Create Droplet. Now a droplet is a virtual private server. Now we can select a region for our server. I will choose New York 1. Then we're going to select an image. If we click on Marketplace, we'll see a library of pre-configured servers we can choose from. I'll enter Rails, and we can see a pre-configured Rails server on Ubuntu populates. We can click on Details to read about what's installed and the steps you should take to get your server up and running. Great. Now if we scroll down, we can choose our machine specs. I will select regular or the minimum required specs for this image. Now we can use an SSH key to connect to our app. Let's click on New SSH key. We'll copy the SSH keygen command. Now we'll open up our terminal. This is our server instance, so we can press Ctrl C to cancel it. Now we'll cd into our home directory. Now let's cd into the .ssh directory. This is a hidden directory. Let's clear out the terminal. Here we'll generate our SSH key by typing SSH keygen. Now we get a prompt asking you to name your key. Let's name our key Rails app. It'll ask you for a password. We'll leave it blank. Great. Now our SSH key has been generated. If we enter ls, we see two files were generated, Rails app and railsapp.pub. Let's print the public key by typing cat railsapp.pub, and let's copy this public key into our clipboard. Now we're going to paste our public key content right here in the add public SSH key box, and we're going to name our SSH key for DigitalOcean side. Great. Now we can SSH onto the live server. Now if we scroll down, we'll keep the rest default and click Create Droplet. Good job, our server is being created. In the meantime, let's configure our SSH config file so that we can easily SSH from our local machine. Let's open up our terminal. Now we're currently in the .ssh directory. We'll type vim config to edit or create our SSH config file. Let's press I to insert. Now we'll enter host and name our server we'll SSH into. We'll call ours Rails app. You can name yours whatever you like. Now we'll enter host name and we'll enter the IP address of our machine. Now our server is still being created, so we'll just wait a few seconds. Great. And once your droplet's been created, you should see this IP address. We'll copy that and paste that for host name. Next, we're going to specify a user. Now we'll enter root for the root user. Then we'll specify port. So we'll specify the default SSH port number, which is 22. Then we'll enter a identity file. So we'll enter the root directory, and we're going to go into the .ssh, and then we're going to reference the Rails app private key. Then we press escape to exit insert mode, and type :wq to save our file. Now let's just clear our console, and we're going to check if our file was successfully created. So let's go SSH into let's cd into our regular directory and type cat.ssh/config. Now this is the config file we just created. Great. Now let's try SSHing into our app. Let's type SSH Rails app. Enter yes. Great job. We've successfully SSH'd into our app. Now you can read the server message if you like. It has some important notes about which files to configure, the passwords for our users, and additional information. You may have noticed there's a note about a Rails system user. We're going to use this Rails user to launch and run our apps. Basically, any of the typical operations you do while developing your Rails app, we're going to do this while signed into the Rails user. If you click on Get Started, you can read about the first time instructions and general tips for using the server. Great, let's clear the console. Now let's try signing in to the Rails user. We're going to type sudo -i -u Rails. This is the name of the Rails user. As you can see, we've signed in to the Rails user. If we type ls and hit enter, we can see the Rails user has a folder name example in their home directory. We're going to place our Rails app in the same directory as this example folder. So let's visit the example app that's currently running. Let's copy the IP address and visit it in our browser. As we can see, there's some information here, including the Ruby version and Rails version. So now we've confirmed our server is up and running. There's a few more steps we have to complete to deploy our app to this server. Great. Now let's open up our terminal. Great. Now let's open up our terminal. Let's open a new tab. We'll have one for our root user and another for our Rails user. It will make doing operations on our server a bit easier. So let's SSH in this new tab back into our Rails app. Great. As you can see, we've already SSH'd to the root user and we've switched into the Rails user in the other tab. Now our app uses a different version of Ruby. The server comes with Ruby 2.7 installed. Our app uses Ruby 3.0.0. So we'll be installing RVM, which will allow us to easily switch between the different versions of Ruby. Now let's type ruby-v to check the Ruby version. We see that 2.7 is installed. Let's clear that. Now we'll head over to RVM. RVM allows you to run multiple versions of Ruby on a machine. Before we do that, let's ensure this install is safe by installing GNU PG2 on our machine as the root user. Great. Now we have the GNU PG2 package installed. It will allow us to run the gpg2 command to verify the integrity of the download. Let's copy the first line from the RVM download page and paste it into our terminal. Great, everything's looking good. Then we're going to copy the download link for RVM and paste it into our terminal. Now an updated RVM version is being installed on the server. Fantastic. Now that RVM is updated, let's run RVM reload. RVM was reloaded. Now we'll enter RVM install 3.0.0 or whatever Ruby version the app currently is. Now Ruby version 3.0.0 is being downloaded onto the server. This will take a few moments, so get comfortable and I'll see you shortly. Good job. Now Ruby version 3 is done installing. Now let's open up our Rails app on our local machine. We now need a way to deploy our app from our local machine to the Rails server. So we're going to create a shell script that will make a copy of our app from our local machine and we'll place it into our live server. We'll call our file deploy.sh. At the top, we'll write #bang/bin/bash. Then we'll enter tar-czf to create a compressed file. Then we're going to name our file app.tar.gz. Fantastic. Then we're going to specify the directories and files that will go into this compressed file. So the deploy.sh file will run from the root directory, so we can reference the files we want to copy over to our live server. I've included most of the files and folders in the root directory, but I have left out the git attributes and git ignore files, since we're not using git to deploy our app. Great, at this point our compressed file has been created. Now we're going to copy these files over via SSH. This is done via the scp command. Now we'll refer to the file we're copying, so we'll type the root directory and we're just going to reference the app.tar.gz that we just created. Then we'll specify the server we're copying to. So we'll enter the host name we give our server. Let's just double check what that host name was. So we'll write cat.ssh/config in a new terminal, and we see we named it Rails app. So we'll type Rails app. Then we'll enter the home directory for the Rails user. Now we go out one directory because we SSH in as the root user, and this is how we're going to access the Rails user directory. Next, we'll just clean up the app.targz we just made. Now we'll start an SSH session on the machine. Let's enter SSH Rails app, 2 arrows, end SSH, and then end SSH. Inside this session block, we're going to be executing commands on the server, just like when we SSH'd into the server as the root user. So, as soon as we enter to the server, we're going to enter system control stop rails.service. Next, we'll change the Rails user directory as the root user. We're going to go into the Rails user directory. Then we're going to remove any kind of deployment we've previously made. So we're going to remove the entire app folder. Then we're going to remake the app folder with make directory. Then we're going to extract app.targz into the new app directory we just made. Then we'll clean up by removing the compressed file with remove app.targz. Now that we've copied our files, we need to change the permissions on the app folder and its contents so our Rails user can access them. So we'll run change ownership with the R option, and we're going to set the user to Rails and the group to Rails. Great, we've changed the owner of the files. Now we'll sign into the Rails user via sudo -i-u Rails. Now we're going to cd into the app directory as the Rails user. Then as the Rails user, we're going to run bundle install to install any new gems in our app. After doing so, we'll exit. This will sign us out of the Rails user. Now we're currently the root user, so we're going to run system control restart rails.service. Great job. Now that's all we need to do. But one more thing, we're going to need to make this file executable. So we're going to use the change mod command. However, we're going to have to access the file from our local machine. So clear out our terminal. Then we're going to run the change mod command, and we're going to set it to executable, so we'll do +x. Now we're going to reference the deploy.sh file. That's all we need to do. We'll hit enter. Great. Now this file should be all we need to deploy our Rails app to our server. Great job, we did it. Now we'll edit the Rails service file. This is the file that will automatically run our Rails app whenever our live server restarts. Let's clear out our directory. Now we'll sign into the root user. Now we'll enter vim etc systemd system/rails.service. This is going to edit the Rails service file. We are going to change the working directory value, which is currently pointing to the example app. We'll press I to insert, then we'll replace example with the name of our app, which is conveniently app. Next, we're going to press escape, :WQ to save, press enter. Great. The next file we have to edit is the Nginx configuration file. Let's enter vim etc nginx sites enabled rails. Now we're going to edit the third line. Let's press I to enter edit mode. We'll set example to app, just like in our Rails service file. Let's press escape, :WQ to save. Great. Excellent work. Now let's reload Nginx with systemctl reload Nginx. Great, let's clear that. Now let's go back onto our local machine. Let's cd into our app's root directory. Now we'll enter /deploy.sh to execute our deployment script. This is going to deploy our Rails app to our live server. If you press enter, we can see what's happening in the SSH session in the terminal. Now we'll wait for the deployment to finish. Great, now our files have deployed. We can ignore these warnings for now. Now let's open up the terminal with our Rails user signed in. Let's cd into the app directory. From here, we can run our typical Rails commands. Before we first load up our app, we need to create the database with Rails. So we'll enter Rails db create and hit enter. After the database is created, let's enter db migrate. So the development and test database were just created. Now we'll enter Rails db migrate. We'll hit enter. Good job, we've successfully initialized our Rails app. Now we're going to switch over to our root user. Let's enter systemctl stop rails.service. Let's visit the IP address of our server. Since we stopped the Rails service, Nginx is showing an error page. This is good. So let's enter systemctl start rails.service to start up our Rails server. Let's refresh our app. Excellent, our app is running. We can view our pages and everything is running swimmingly. Now we're accessing the app by the server's IP address, and it's also showing that our connection is not secure. So in the next video, we're going to route a domain to our app and set up SSL. This will secure our user's connection via HTTPS. We'll see you in the next video.